In 1970, Peter Green was one of the most successful rock musicians in Britain. He had founded Fleetwood Mac, written multiple hit songs, and was being hailed as one of the greatest guitarists of his generation. He was making more money than he'd ever dreamed of. And then he gave it all away. He told his bandmates he wanted to give all their money to charity. When they refused, he quit the band he'd created. He descended into mental illness, spent years in psychiatric hospitals, and became a recluse. The man who had written Black Magic Woman and Albatross, songs that would become timeless classics, disappeared from music entirely. This is the tragic story of Peter Green, the brilliant guitarist who created Fleetwood Mac, then lost his mind. I'm your host at High Voltage Rock History, and today we're diving deep into one of rock's most heartbreaking tales. Let's get started. By his late teens, Peter was playing in local bands around London. He shortened his name to Peter Green and developed a reputation as a guitarist with exceptional feel and tone. He wasn't the fastest player, but his note choice and emotional depth were remarkable. In 1965, Peter got his big break. John Mayall, the legendary British blues bandleader, needed a guitarist to fill in for Eric Clapton, who was taking a brief break. Peter stepped in and impressed everyone so much that when Clapton left permanently to form Cream in 1966, Mayall chose Peter as his permanent replacement. Think about that. Peter Green replaced Eric Clapton in John Mayall's Blues Breakers. That's like being asked to fill in for a guitar god. But Peter didn't just fill the role, he made it his own. His playing on the album A Hard Road showcased a different approach than Clapton's. Where Clapton was fiery and aggressive, Peter was lyrical and melodic. His tone was warm and vocal-like, with a sustain that seemed to go on forever. B.B. King himself later said that Peter Green was the only white blues guitarist who made him break out in a cold sweat. That's the kind of respect Peter commanded. By 1967, Peter Green was ready to form his own band. He recruited Mick Fleetwood, the drummer from the Blues Breakers, and bassist Bob Brunning, later replaced by John McVie, another Blues Breakers alumnus. He named the band Fleetwood Mac as a tribute to his rhythm section. Peter's vision was to create a blues band that could honor the American blues tradition while adding their own British sensibility. The band's early sound was pure blues, covers of songs by Elmore James, Howlin' Wolf, and Robert Johnson, mixed with Peter's original compositions. In 1968, they added a second guitarist, Jeremy Spencer, who specialized in slide guitar and Elmore James-style blues. Later that year, they brought in a third guitarist, Danny Kirwan, creating a unique three-guitar lineup. But Peter was always the leader, the primary songwriter, and the creative force. Their self-titled debut album, Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac, was released in 1968 and became an instant hit in the UK. Peter's guitar work was mesmerizing. His tone was unlike anything else in British rock. He played a 1959 Gibson Les Paul that had been modified with the neck pickup reversed, giving it a distinctive out-of-phase sound that became his signature. Songs like I Loved Another Woman and Long Gray Mare showcased Peter's ability to channel the spirit of American blues while creating something uniquely his own. The band was on their way to becoming one of Britain's biggest acts. In late 1968, Fleetwood Mac released a single that would change everything, Albatross. Albatross was unlike anything the band had done before. It wasn't a blues song, it was a dreamy, atmospheric instrumental with a haunting melody played on Peter's Les Paul. The song was inspired by Peter's love of Latin music and the smooth guitar sounds of Santo and Johnny's Sleepwalk. The track features Peter's guitar floating over a gentle rhythm, with each note carefully placed and sustained. There are no flashy solos, no technical fireworks, just pure emotional melody. It's one of the most beautiful guitar pieces ever recorded. Albatross became Fleetwood Mac's first #1 hit in the UK, staying at the top for 1 week in January 1969. It sold over 1 million copies and introduced the band to a mainstream audience beyond blues purists. The success of Albatross. Also in 1968, Peter Green wrote and recorded one of his most enduring compositions, Black Magic Woman.
Got a black magic woman. I got a black magic woman.
The song was inspired by Peter's fascination with Latin rhythms and his experiences with women. By his late teens, Peter was playing in London's bustling blues scene, earning a reputation as a prodigy with a uniquely soulful touch. His big break came in 1966 when he joined John Mayall's Blues Breakers, stepping directly into the shoes of Eric Clapton. No small task, considering Clapton was already being hailed as God by the British press. At first, fans were skeptical. Could anyone fill Clapton's shoes? But Peter's playing quickly silenced the doubters. His tone was thick and haunting, his phrasing emotional and economical. He didn't need to show off. Every note he played meant something. Even Mayall was stunned, later saying, Peter could make a guitar sound like it was crying. During his short tenure with the Blues Breakers, Peter wrote and recorded The Supernatural, a slow-burning instrumental that showcased his signature sustain and vibrato. It was clear. Peter Green wasn't just another Clapton clone. He was a new force in British blues. But Peter had bigger dreams. He wanted to start a band where he could be the leader, free to explore his vision of the blues. In early 1970, Fleetwood Mac was touring Europe at the height of their success. During a stop in Munich, Germany, Peter attended a party at a hippie commune. Someone offered him LSD, and Peter, always curious about expanding his consciousness, accepted. What happened during that trip remains somewhat mysterious, but the effects were catastrophic and permanent. According to various accounts, the LSD may have been laced with strychnine or other substances. Peter had a severe psychotic episode that lasted for hours, possibly days. When he emerged from the experience, Peter Green was a different person. His bandmates immediately noticed the change. He was paranoid, disconnected, and increasingly erratic. He began wearing robes and growing his fingernails long, talking about religious visions and the evils of money. Psychiatrists would later diagnose Peter with schizophrenia, though it's unclear whether the LSD triggered a latent condition or caused permanent damage to his brain chemistry. What's certain is that the brilliant, sensitive guitarist who wrote Albatross was slipping away, replaced by someone his friends barely recognized. Peter started insisting that Fleetwood Mac should give away all their earnings. He wanted the band to perform for free, to reject the music industry entirely. When his bandmates, who had families to support, refused, Peter became increasingly isolated and angry.
When the day goes to sleep and the full moon.
In May 1970, Peter wrote one final song for Fleetwood Mac, The Green Manalishi, with the two-prong crown. It was unlike anything he'd written before. Dark, heavy, almost demonic. The song was inspired by a nightmare Peter had about a green dog that represented money and greed. The lyrics are chilling. Now when the day goes to sleep, and the full moon looks, the night is so black that the darkness cooks. Peter's guitar tone is menacing and distorted. A far cry from the sweet sustain of Albatross. The song sounds like a man wrestling with demons, which is exactly what Peter was doing. The Green Manalishi became Fleetwood Mac's last hit with Peter Green. It was a cry for help disguised as a rock song, and nobody fully understood it at the time. Judas Priest would later cover it, turning it into a heavy metal classic, but the original version remains a haunting document of Peter's mental deterioration. Shortly after recording The Green Manalishi, Peter played his final show with Fleetwood Mac on May 10. He walked off stage, left the band he'd created, and disappeared into obscurity. Peter Green's departure from Fleetwood Mac shocked the music world. Here was a guitarist at the peak of his powers, a songwriter with hit after hit, walking away from guaranteed success and wealth. Why would anyone do that? The truth is, Peter's mental illness had convinced him that money was evil, that fame was corrupting his soul. He believed that continuing with Fleetwood Mac would destroy him spiritually. In his fractured mind, leaving was the only way to save himself. Fleetwood Mac continued without him, eventually transforming into the pop-rock juggernaut that would produce Rumors and Night. But the band that Peter created, the blues rock powerhouse of the late 60s, died with his departure. Peter moved back in with his parents in London and tried to live a simple life. He grew increasingly reclusive, rarely leaving the house. Friends who visited found him barely recognizable. The charismatic guitarist had been replaced by a withdrawn, paranoid man who spoke in riddles. He made a few attempts to record solo albums in the early 70s, but the sessions were chaotic and unfocused. The spark that had made him one of rock's greatest guitarists seemed to have been extinguished entirely. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, Peter Green descended into what can only be described as madness. He was in and out of psychiatric hospitals, receiving electroshock therapy and heavy medication for his schizophrenia. In 1977, Peter's mental state deteriorated so badly that he threatened his accountant with a shotgun, demanding that the man stop sending him royalty checks. Peter was arrested and spent time in a psychiatric hospital rather than prison. The man who had written Black Magic Woman was now considered dangerous to himself and others. For years Peter lived in poverty, sleeping rough on the streets of London, or staying in halfway houses. He grew a long beard, wore tattered clothes, and was often mistaken for a homeless vagrant. People who had once cheered his guitar solos now walked past him without recognition. His family and former bandmates tried to help, but Peter's illness made it nearly impossible. He was deeply paranoid, convinced that people were trying to steal from him or control his mind. The medication helped stabilize him somewhat, but it also dulled his creativity and left him in a fog. During this period, Peter rarely touched a guitar. The instrument that had once been an extension of his soul now seemed foreign to him. The music world moved on, and Peter Green became a cautionary tale. The genius who lost everything to mental illness and drugs. In the late 1990s, with the help of his family and proper medication management, Peter Green attempted a comeback. He formed the Peter Green Splinter Group, and began playing small club shows, mostly performing blues standards rather than his own compositions. The comeback was bittersweet. Peter could still play guitar, his tone was still recognizable, his feel still there, but the fire was gone. He played mechanically, without the passion and innovation that had made him legendary. Fans who came to see the man who wrote Albatross left disappointed, realizing that the Peter Green they loved was gone forever. Still, there was something heroic about his attempt. Here was a man who had been to hell and back, who had spent decades battling an illness that destroyed his career and nearly killed him, getting back on stage and trying to play music again. In 1998, Fleetwood Mac inducted Peter Green into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Mick Fleetwood gave an emotional speech about Peter's genius and the debt the band owed him. Peter attended the ceremony, but seemed uncomfortable with the attention, a ghost of his former self. He continued to perform sporadically through the early 2000s, but his health was declining. The years of medication, electroshock therapy, and the ravages of mental illness had taken their toll. Peter Green spent his final years living quietly in England, cared for by family members. He rarely gave interviews and avoided the spotlight entirely. The man who had once been hailed as Britain's greatest blues guitarist wanted nothing more than to be left alone. In the years before his death, a new generation of guitarists began rediscovering Peter Green's work. Players like Gary Moore, who owned and played Peter's original Les Paul, Joe Bonamassa, and John Mayer, spoke reverently about Peter's influence on their playing. Albatross and Black Magic Woman found new audiences through streaming services and classic rock radio. Music historians began reassessing Peter's legacy, recognizing him as one of the most important figures in British blues and a key architect of Fleetwood Mac's success. Without Peter Green, there would be no Fleetwood Mac, no Rumors, no Dreams, no multi-platinum success. On July 25, 2020, Peter Green died peacefully in his sleep at age 73. The cause was natural causes, though the years of mental illness and medication had certainly shortened his life. Tributes poured in from around the world. Mick Fleetwood called him my dearest friend, and the most talented musician I've ever known. Guitarists from every generation praised his tone, his feel, and his songwriting. The music world mourned the loss of a true original. Here was a man blessed with extraordinary talent, a guitarist who could make his instrument sing, a songwriter who created timeless classics, a bandleader who founded one of rock's most successful groups. And then, through a combination of mental illness and a bad LSD trip, it all fell apart. Peter lost his band, his career, his wealth, and nearly his life. He spent decades in psychiatric hospitals and on the streets, a cautionary tale about the fragility of genius and the devastating power of mental illness. But Peter Green's music survived. Albatross still sounds as beautiful today as it did in Black Magic Woman remains a blues rock standard. Oh Well and the Green Manalishi showcase a guitarist at the absolute peak of his power. Listen to early Fleetwood Mac albums, then play on Fleetwood Mac Blues Jam at Chess, and you'll hear a guitarist who could do anything. Peter Green didn't need to play fast or flashy. He played with soul, with feeling, with a tone so pure it could break your heart. His influence on rock guitar is immeasurable. Without Peter Green, there's no Gary Moore, no early Fleetwood Mac sound, no Black Magic Woman for Santana to cover. He proved that blues guitar could be both powerful and delicate, that simplicity could be more moving than technical virtuosity. Peter Green deserves to be remembered alongside Clapton, Page, and Beck as one of the great British blues guitarists. His story reminds us that genius and madness often walk hand in hand, and that mental illness can destroy even the brightest talents. What's your favorite Peter Green song? Drop a comment below and let me know. And subscribe to High Voltage Rock History so you never miss another untold story from rock's greatest legends. Until next time, keep it loud, keep it real, and keep it rock and roll.